Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this webinar, which is part of the Spark Your Legacy series, brought to you by the Productivity Programme and supported by the University of Lincoln and the European Regional Development Fund. And today's webinar is on the topic of business and community continuance. As always, there are lots of things on offer from the Productivity Programme, from grant funding, academic expertise, graduate internships, specialist advisor support, business angel network, and graduate startup funding. There is so much more on offer from the Productivity Programme to help you and your businesses be more productive, be more efficient, and to grow, particularly in these difficult times, and to cope with the environment that's out there. So I strongly encourage you to reach out to the university and the Productivity Programme and find out what is available to you. And we'll make a start with today's webinar. Okay, today is the second in the Spark Your Legacy series. In 2 weeks' time, that's the last one. And today we're talking about business and community continuance. Now, I've already done a bit of an intro for the recording of this where I mentioned the benefits of the Productivity Programme. There are lots of new things coming out all the time, so please keep up to date with them, reach out to them, keep in constant contact with the Productivity Programme. I think I mentioned last time, I got a client who'd had £10,000 worth of full funding towards the growth of their business, employing people, taking on new equipment and doing new things in their business. So there is lots of support, not just money, there's lots of peer-to-peer support, etc. as well. And of course, if you want more webinars like this, let them know. They'll put webinars on around the topics that you've got as well. If you've got any questions, please use the questions and answers box. That's the box that I'll be monitoring through today's webinar. So please make sure you use that. If you do put something in the chat box by mistake, that's okay, but it might just take me a little bit longer to see it. Make sure you've got plenty of paper. As always, take plenty of notes. Make sure you've got something to write with. Make sure you've got something, as I've got here. I've got my coffee with a bit of honey in it to keep the voice going. I've got a few webinars I'm doing today. So make sure you're hydrated and make sure you do listen to what we're talking through. And as things come to your mind, write them down. They might not be necessarily relevant as you're going through the webinar, but they could be relevant when you read back through them as notes. So please make sure that you go through those. So the first things to sort of think about are the definitions. What is continuance? Well, continuance is simply continuing. And that's why I was interested in the conversations that we were starting there. Business is about continuing. Okay. And that's what we want to do. We want to have continuance in our building. So no matter what disruption, whatever's round the corner, whatever our team are doing, whatever the environment of our clients, our suppliers, as Frank talked about with, being cautious on the sales performance side of things at the moment, whatever it is, we need to think about continuance in our businesses. And the image of the tree there is put there to remind me that, trees grow no matter what, whether it's winter, whether it's summer, whether it's spring, whether something gets in the way, they find a way of getting around it. If a hedge suddenly goes up at the side of that tree, it will either push the hedge and the fence over, it will just engulf it, it will grow around it, it will bend in the wind. It's about making sure that your business is able to continue and has continuance. Now, the other thing that legacy means, and that's what we're talking about in this 3-part series, is permanence. And as the guy is there with the flip chart, I want you to start this session by writing down some definitions. What does continuance, what does permanence mean to you? Okay. Does permanence mean a business that will go on forever, even when you're gone? Is it about family taking over the business? If you're an employee of the business, is it about getting a business that's successful? If you're a manager or a leader in the business, is it about having a business which allows you to grow within it? What does continuance mean, and what does permanence mean? Is it about the business staying as it is, in the structure and the format that it has? Is it about keeping up with the times? Just jot some things down now. And this is where I miss the meeting format because I can't see your heads all down looking at things now. But write some things down. What does continuance, what does permanence mean to you? And as you do that, what I want to say is that both of those should be heading towards your vision. Now, we've covered vision and dreams in previous webinars, and all of those are available. All of my recordings are available for University of Lincoln, and they'll send you a link to those. It's on a YouTube channel. They're all on there. So just remind yourself, what is that vision? What is that dream? Because the act of continuing is the motion towards that dream. It's going closer and closer to the vision and achieving the vision, achieving that mission that you set. So perhaps you need to just revisit it. Has it dimmed a little? Has it changed because of the environment that's around you? Has it changed because of what you've learnt during these webinars? I hope perhaps it has. So what is your vision? What is your dream? Jot any notes down that you need to think of with that. So as I go through the next couple of slides, I want you to think about your definition, your items of continuance. What does permanence mean to you? And what is your vision and dream? Is it clear? Is it crystal clear? Okay. And of course, we are creating a business legacy. That permanence, that top level is not about what you take, because they're the bottom 3 levels of sales, profit, and order. It's about what the business gives, what it gives to its staff, what it gives to its supply chain, what it gives to its clients, what it gives to the business owners, the leaders, the managers, what it gives to the community around it. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later on as well. So we're trying to build a legacy that continues. And that's really important, to have those definitions and have those items jotted down as we go through this to refer back to as well. So this is the second in the 3-part current series. For those who haven't been on this before, I think, Sophia, this is your first one. Last time we covered ongoing adaptation, evolution, and we talked about the way our business needs continually be looking at ways in which we can keep up and keep ahead of our competition, keep ahead of the environment that we're in. And it's important to realize that the notes from last time and the notes from this time are going to come together in that next webinar in 2 weeks' time, which is about dynamics, about action. It's about turning the dreams that you're starting to make some notes of into reality. So I really want you to make sure that you, between now and then, have a very clear vision of what your dream, your clarity of your vision, your dream is, what your mission is. Okay, so we're going to really look at next time how you can take action to turn that into reality. So, and if you're watching the recording of this, it is a good point to stop here and get those definitions nailed down. So this is an interesting question. And there was a guy that I met in business some time ago, and he was a land developer, and he purchased some land, and he got to the point where he bailed out. He left his business partner with the land. He'd had enough. He'd waited long enough for his return, and he bailed out. And this guy then took the business. He took the land. He got some amazing land deals, hundreds of homes built on it, made millions out of it. And Brian, who is this business owner, had lots of things that he coped with, lots of things that he did. And he basically got to the end where he bailed out and said, I've had enough. I want to take my money and go. And the question I asked him was that if you could do it all over again, what would you do? And his simple answer was he wouldn't do it at all. Now, that was quite a negative. It was quite shocking to hear him do that because I thought he would do things differently. And I want you to start with this question, that if you think about that vision that you've written down, okay, and you've got to that point, if you could do it all over again, what would you do? Because I don't want the answer that Brian gave. I don't want the answer of, you know what, I just wouldn't do it. Okay, Joe might say, if I've got to work at home and I've got to do home working all the time, I won't do it. But if you could do it all over again, what would you do? What would you do differently? Because if you think about it from that bird's eye view of looking back, those things that you would do to create that legacy, to create the business that you want that's going to continue, they're the things that you need to be doing now. And what I don't want anybody to do is to get to that vision, get to that dream, and look back and think, oh, if only I'd have done that, if only I'd have done that. Now, of course, we'll always have that, and I'd be a fool to say otherwise. But I want to minimize that, because if we can actually predict that kind of feeling that we would have, and we might already have some things that we would have done differently already, can we learn anything from those? Can we do anything in those in the future? So think about that. You know, if you could do it all over again, what would you do? Would you do it exactly as you've done it? You know, I had a construction business for nearly 20 years. I would do things differently, but I'd still do the same business. You know, I did very well at my business, and I exited it well, and did very well out of it. So I want you to think about that that question. Really important as you write that vision down, and that permanence and that legacy and that continuance. What would you do? I want to ask another set of questions. So the definition of business and community continuance, okay, is really the answer to the question, do your clients fervently defend, support, and help your business? Okay, think about that. Do your clients defend, support, and help your business? Now, I've put the picture of the bees. I'm a beekeeper, by the way, so I love my bees. But I'm the client. I'm the one that gets the honey out of the hive. Okay, when they decide to make enough. And trust me, when I go to those bees, I had one episode 2 years ago where I got stung 32 times, and I suffer with mild anaphylactic shock, by the way. So I'm a client of the bees, but I support them. I defend them. When those wasps come attacking, when I have to put the mice guards on the bee hive to stop the mice getting in, when I look at infection, I'm defending and supporting and helping that hive thrive. They're all looking after the queen bee. The business is looking after itself. Okay. But me as the beekeeper, I'm the client. I'm the one that gets the honey. I'm defending, I'm supporting, I'm helping that hive. How many clients do you have? How many people outside of the business do you have that go to those extremes to help your business continue? That might be you do. I've had businesses, I've got the parachute thing there. Every year I used to do something for charity in business, and I've had clients jump out of planes with me. And that's why that's there, to support the charities that we do. I've had people walk the Yorkshire Free Peaks. And it's about the client feeling part of that continuing business. And also, I've had times when we've really struggled. I've had to go to clients when we've had cash flow problems and VAT issues, and I've had to go and say, can you pay me early? I've had other people where they've been in networking groups or in conferences, and somebody's been bad-mouthing the service that my companies have offered in the past, and clients have stood up and gone across to them and told them they're wrong. And have you done this? And have you used them for this, because they're amazing. So, what we're talking about here with business and community continuance is not just having your own continuance, but making sure you have clients that defend you, support you, and help your business. And I want you to use that beehive example as something in your own business. And the other thing to think about is, if a client's going to jump out of a plane with you and they're going to use your parachute, do they trust that you've packed the parachute? And if it was the other way around, would you trust the parachute that they've packed for you as well? Okay. Is there that element of trust with your clients? And some of you might say, I'm in an industry that'll never happen. But it might not necessarily be your clients. It might be your supply chain. It might be the community that you serve as well. And the community is the friends and the family of the people that work for you, your friends and family. So I just want to get that to sink in a little bit with there. So legacy is about intentionally leaving your mark in the way that you want it to be. Okay. It's how you want to see the environment and the world changed around you, even if it is just friends, family, the local village, the local town, the city, the area, whatever it is. Business continuance is about being in control of the structure to make this happen. And then you make your exit on your terms. That might be a complete exit. It might be you exit because your life eventually runs out and the business carries on way beyond your generation. We've talked about generations in the past. But it's about making your exit from whatever it is, however you want it to be. Even if it's just staying, I want to stay in the business, but I want to exit the MD role and I want to do more of a chairman role, whatever it is. But exiting and having that structure on your terms. Now, the final thing there is big, hairy, audacious goal. What is your big purpose? What is your big reason for being in business? Does it need a polish? Does it need a little bit of a buff up to make it more shiny? If you want people to support it, defend it, and help you build it and continue with it, people have got to believe in the big, hairy, audacious goal that you've got, the big legacy that you want to leave. Okay, Sony's big, hairy, audacious goal, just to remind people of this, is to change the world's perception of Japanese products from one of poor quality to one of exceptional quality. And they get everybody behind that. Microsoft, Bill Gates, was to put a computer on every desk in every home and in every office. That was his big, hairy, audacious goal. Has he achieved it? Probably. Possibly not. But has he certainly lived by that big, hairy, audacious goal? And have people wanted to continue that legacy going forward as well? So think about that. Think about being in control. For many of us, we like to be in control. I love being in control. It's what I love doing. But it's doing it on your own terms. So moving that on, business continuance. I want you to think about the answer to some of these questions and jot things down on your notes as we go through. So this is where the workshop side of it starts to think. If you want your business to continue, you need people in the business that think like you. So who else in the business, perhaps you might think of a position, perhaps you might think of a name right now. Who else in the business thinks like you? Who else in the business has a passion for the mission that the business has, for the journey that the business is going on? Not the vision, but the mission of how you're going to get there. Who else has a passion for that? Who do you want to see in the business? Are there particular people that you would love to have in the business? For some of us, it might be family. For other people, it might be people we've worked with in the past that you'd love to get them from where they're working now and get them in your business. There's a guy I work with who's got a tech geo mapping business, and he's had somebody in a business. He was a previous business partner. He's been wanting to get them in his business for quite some time. So who do you want to see in your business? Again, it might not be a person, it might be a position. What would your team reply if someone attacked or criticized the business? Okay, so if you think about it, if somebody in a conference or on a course stood up and attacked or criticized your business, and you had your team members there, how would they reply? Would they defend it? Would they support it? Things to be writing down as we go through this. Questions to ask. The other thing is, when did you last thank somebody for standing up? How many times have you seen somebody, even with a colleague, defend the business and you just let it happen and didn't thank them for it? And do you have a plan for succession, and have you shared it? Yeah. That doesn't necessarily have to be an exit plan. Succession isn't about exit. I do a lot of work with people with succession planning, and it's not always about exit. I've got some great people who have stepped down or stepped sideways. But have you shared it? And the quote there from Emerson is, nothing great was ever achieved without enthusiasm. Business continuance needs enthusiasm. It needs passion. It needs people who have similar enthusiasm, similar passion for the business as you do, that will defend it. So think about that internally, but also think about suppliers. Who's been for you during these difficult times? Who stood by you? You know, certainly when I had the construction business, I went through a really hard time when I lost a client when Persimmon Homes took over Westbury Homes. And I needed some help from suppliers, and 2 or 3 suppliers were not there for me at all. And I remembered that, you know, when we picked ourselves back up and had the best year we ever had the year after, we did very little with those suppliers, but we did a lot more with those that supported us, those that helped us. When did you last thank a supplier for helping you out? When did you last thank a client for helping you out? So all of those things can be within your business, or they can be the team outside of the business. So just think about that now. And if there's something there that you want to share, use the Q&A box. Put something in there. If there's something that you want us to talk about, or you want to ask about that, then please put that in the Q&A box. Is there a particular position? Is there somewhere? We don't want to know the names of the people, but let us know if there are people in your business that you now realize perhaps think like you or have the same passion for you. Share what you've written down. I am really trusting that you're writing things down here. Moving on to a little bit more about business continuance and talking about the business side of it first of all. And again, please put stuff in the Q&A box. Let me know what you're thinking. It doesn't have to be a question. You just share something that's come up, because other people will love to see that. Here's 2 big questions. Okay. If your business was sold tomorrow and for the buyer, money or people were no problem, what do you think they would change? Because if you think they are the changes that they would make, then the likelihood is you should be thinking and putting those into your business continuance plans. And I used to say, you know, wave a magic wand. If a business was sold tomorrow and you could wave a magic wand, you know, what do you think they would do? But if for the buyer, money or people were no object, no problem, what do you think they would change? Write down some things that, you know, if perhaps money or people were no problem for you, what would you change? Because if you look at it from that perspective, you'll get a list of things that you need to perhaps consider. And I'll come back to the second question in a moment. Hazel's put here, if staff think the same as you, does this limit innovation? Okay, that's a really great question, Hazel. I love that question, and I'll come back to that in just a moment. That's a great question. Thank you for asking that. So once you've got the changes that somebody else would make, and interesting that Hazel's asked that, because that is now about thinking outside the box. What would somebody outside the business do to make sure the business continued? And if you think and put yourself in their shoes, then that is a big thing that you can create a list from. Then you have to look at that, because not all the changes would be changes that you like. I know people, I had a friend who sold his funeral director business over in Mansfield a few years ago, and half the changes he loved and thought were great, and it's what it needed for the business to carry on the legacy of his family, because it was his dad's business before him. But he sold it to Dignity, the American company, but some of the changes he didn't like. And it's more important that when you're trying to build business continuance, you pick the changes that you like first. Now, I'm not saying all the changes that you don't like are going to be bad, and perhaps the other team can give you a different perspective, but it's really important to do that list of changes, and then more importantly, pick the ones that you would like, because you don't want a business which becomes a bad job. And that's what happened with this guy. Now, Hazel's asked a great question there. If staff think the same as you, does this limit innovation? Now, I just want to go back to that slide. Yeah, who else in the business thinks like you? And I think that's what's asking that question, Hazel. If you want to take yourself off of mute, Hazel, and just expand on that a little bit more, what I would suggest is you want people who think like you, and they help the business continue. And as Hazel said there, you also need innovation. You need people who are going to bring new ideas. And I would hope that you are like that too. So what we want are people with the attitude, I think, for thinking. Okay. And I think that's a great question, Hazel, that it's not so much, you don't want people who are just mini-me's. They're just robots that do what you say. You want people who think like you, not perhaps have the same thoughts as you, but their thought process is the same as you. Who else thinks about driving the business forward? Who else thinks about the mission? Who else thinks about the continuance of the business? Does that make sense, Hazel?
Yeah, I was asking the question really because I work in a business where there isn't a lot of turnover of staff. And when we recruit people who are very similar to our own values, aspirations,
Yeah, quite right.
process. But I feel that actually, in today's fast-moving business, that limits our ability to change with the times. We need new blood, new ideas. And although that might be difficult from a working point of view, you may clash. It allows the business to grow because it brings new, fresh thinking into the business.
It does. And I'm glad that you're recruiting people on that basis of values and people who have those traits and those characters that you have in the business. And I think, yeah, you've got to look at if the, I don't know the structure of the business, but if the people at the top of the business are trying to innovate and trying to think of new things, then trying to encourage that in these people is a good thing. If that's not possible, then, and I've worked with a couple of people over the years where that hasn't been possible because of the structure that they have and the environment they work in, because it's very, very compliance based, that very often and that's why I talk about community, it's the people outside of the business that can bring the innovation in. So sometimes it's the customer focus groups that can bring innovation and new ideas to the business. So the people in the business, which are those well-oiled machines that can churn out, what is needed, can very often do some amazing things with the innovation and the ideas that come from outside. Sometimes it can be the supply chain. Feedback is really important, and it doesn't have to be from within. And sometimes, people employ me as a coach for that, that third party perspective. So if you've got other advisors, look at your accountants, look at dare I say it, the banks, look at other people that, you can feel comfortable with, that might just give you that spark that's needed to light up the doing stuff that the great people have got that's in your business. And it's good to hear you don't have that staff churn, Hazel. That's really good. And you're right, but sometimes think about who you can bring it in from the outside as well. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. But again, it's for everyone else as well. It's not just the thought process. It's trying to get them to mimic the way that you think as well, and have that passion and that enthusiasm. Joe's put here, I'm concerned about succession planning. I have very few people around me who think like I do. There are many staff who are loyal and committed about their part of the business, but the passion for the overall is questionable. Yeah, and I think, Joe, the idea of this is to put a plan together, to try and think about, just move down to the next slide here, move my mouse. Sorry if you saw that jumping around. Think about who you want to see in the business. Start thinking about the type of people you want to see in the business. And if you start to create an avatar of the people that you want to have to create succession in the business, and you build that up, it's that part of the brain that when you create a picture of it, you attract those kind of things. You know, you buy an orange car because you think nobody else has got an orange car, and then as soon as you drive off the forecourt, everybody's got an orange car. If you create a picture of who you want to be included in that succession plan, what you want them to think like, what you want their passion to be, you know, how you want them to help support and build the business, the more you can create a picture of that person, the more likely you are to find that person, and the more likely are that somebody else will know that person. Yeah, it's a difficult one to balance that passion, and that's why if it's not there, sometimes you've got to bring it in. It's not always possible to build it from within. It's always nice if you can, but it's not always possible for that. Is there anything else, Joe, before I move on to the next couple of slides, that you want to sort of expand on or mention a little bit more on that? Don't know if you're able to take yourself off of mute.
Yeah, I'm just trying.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I suppose I do find it a source of ongoing frustration, and that's why conversations like this are so important to me, because I don't get the opportunity to have those sorts of conversations in the workplace. As I say, great people, great well-meaning people, but it's their bit of the world that they're interested in.
Yeah.
And their bit of the business, and that to see the whole, that's what we're missing. So you're quite right. It's about looking for somebody who I can bring in.
Yeah. And it's interesting because it took me a while to accept. And, you know, I'm thinking of a dry lining company I did some work with some time ago, and they lost a lot of their staff because they tried to make their staff into the future leaders of the business, and they really didn't want it. And this guy just couldn't accept, and it took me a while to accept in my own businesses, that some people, like you've just said there, they're very passionate about what they do, and they don't want anything else. These people are great. If we had people in our business that always want to be part of the succession and the leaders in the business, then we continually have this churn, and we're continually disappointing people. So knowing that they are there, knowing that they're good at what they do, and as you've both mentioned, having the right people doing the right things is great. And if you see that little spark, encourage it. But what I did in the construction business in particular, and also in the garden centre that I had, is I worked out what the skills were I needed in the business for it to continue. And then I created 3 positions in each business that had those skills. And I either recruited from within or recruited from without to put people into those positions. And I chose people on this list. Do they think like with me? Do they have a passion for where the business is going? Would I trust them to pack my parachute? Okay, and these were new people to the business, some of them, because I was trying to build that triad of people that I knew that when I stepped away from the businesses, which I did on a regular basis, every 18 months I would semi-exit a business and then go off and build a new one. That I could do that because I've got this triad. So I recruited on that basis, but I created a very clear avatar of the skill set and the type of person I wanted. And that's what's important to do, Joe. I think, work that out. And, because those people will also might have an input into that. If you share the succession plan, some of these people will have their own views on who they want to work under or work with as well. And that's always a difficult one to balance. And I'm not saying you should just go out there and share your plans with everybody, but it's worth having a think about. So hopefully that's giving you a bit of help. And I'm glad that conversations like this help Joe as well, because that's really important. That's what it's about. Okay. So think about that. If somebody else was to buy the business and money or people were no problem, what would they change? And do that list of changes. And if they If you create a list of changes, then pick and choose off that list what are the things that you would like and what you don't like. Frank, I'll come to yours in a minute on chat box, if that's okay. So community continuance. Going through this slide, who is in your community? Think about it. Is it friends, family? Do the friends and the family of your workers actually have more input and more of an influence on how your workers are at work than perhaps you think? Is it your supply chain? Do you actually do a lot in your community geographically, your town, your city, your region? Okay. What do they think of you right now? What do you think their perception is? What do you think your suppliers think of you? What do you think your clients think of you? What do you think the families of your workers think of you? What do you think your family think of you? What do they think about the business right now? And here's an interesting question. What do you want them to say behind your back? Because generally what they say behind your back is very regularly the honest truth. Okay, you might call it gossip and things like that, but I would rather know what people are going to say behind my back rather than take a chance. I'd rather have feedback. I'd rather somebody, again, support me by saying, just to let you know that so-and-so said this about you and your business. Okay, so what do you want people to say behind your back? What do you want people to say in response to those people behind your back? Some important questions to think about there. And if somebody did criticize you, if somebody did attack you, would people in your community reply? And would they even care? Do the family of one of your workers even care what other people think about your business or what they say about your business? And again, if somebody in the community, if somebody stands up who is outside of your business, when did you last thank them for standing up for you? And the final thing I want you to think about as you go through, perhaps thinking about some of these questions and scribbling your notes down, from the community, what kind of support would you like? Particularly in today's arena, what would you like support with? Think about that. So who's in your community? Perhaps create a quick list. Think about them and think about how they think about you now. How do you want them to think about you? What do you want them to say behind your back? How do you want them to reply when you're attacked? Again, if you're watching the recording or you're going back to recording, this is a good one to stop on and take plenty of notes. Now, as always, you'll recognize this slide from last time, a different image. I always like to mix my images up. But what's getting in the way of your continuance? Sometimes it can be you. Sometimes it can be your team, your managers. Some new ones I've added here. Sometimes the continuance, I mentioned there about having customer focus groups and supplier feedback groups. Very often it's the fear of feedback that gets in the way of us continuing, gets in the way of us looking for support. Sometimes it can be our service. Is actually our service not good enough? Do we need to improve our service? Do we need to change the way that we deliver our service? Is it hearsay and gossip? How many of us have a fear that every time two people are talking in a corner that they're talking about the business or they're gossiping about something in the business? Try and get things like that out in the open. I haven't got a problem with anybody saying it, but say it to me. And if somebody else is saying it behind my back, I'd like to know what it is, and I'd like somebody else to challenge them on it. The other one there, toxicity. Do you have anything, any process, any system, any person in the business who is toxic? Because that will get in the way of your business continuing. It will hold you back. Very often these people don't want change and they become toxic because of it. And please jot any of these down that are getting in your way, because if you realize that they're getting in your way and you're more aware of them, then you can do something about them. And if you write down, hearsay and gossip, that's definitely a problem in our business, then you need an action plan to get around that. If your business is going to have a legacy and it's going to continue, each one of these that's getting in the way, you need an action plan of how to get around it. And the other two are chaos and time. Okay. They often, we say we haven't got time, and it's usually time is very rarely the problem. It's the chaos that steals the time. And the other thing is shyness in your story. Very often it's people not understanding that they can talk. It's not understanding the open door policy. Some people don't like to put their hand up. Some people don't like to say what they've got to say. Sometimes we don't like to say it. Sometimes we're not sharing our story well enough. You know, we assume that they know everything. We assume that they've been told it. And that's really, really important to think about and do some work on. So some things to think about that could be getting in your way. Now, you've got lots of notes here that I'm hoping you've taken. It is about being prepared. Yeah, this doesn't happen by chance. All of the things we've talked about are about being prepared, including them in your plans. It is important that we think in generations. You know, who is it that's coming up the ranks? Who is it that's going out? Yeah, I made the mistake many years ago of having a shareholder who was part of my succession plan, and I didn't bank that he was 10 years older than me. And whilst I wanted to retire early, which I did, he wanted to retire at a similar age, but he was 10 years older than me, so he wasn't a good part of my generation succession plan. And what you've also got to think about is this isn't something that you're going to fix overnight. This is something that needs steps. So we need that progression of continuance and of legacy. Yeah, we've got to build up relationships with our community. We've got to build trust for support with our clients, with our supply chain, with our team. So don't think it's got to be all done in one foul swoop. It's about putting those steps into place. And of course, we need to recap. We need to take action. We need to make changes, and we need to do things that are going to make a difference. So what I'd like you to do, and I'm just going to have a look at Frank's comment that he's put in the chat box here. What I'd like you to do is just have a quick look at your notes. And if there's something that stands out, if there's something that you need to work on, if there's something that needs some action, if there's something that needs us to change, if there's a thing that needs creating, if there's a thing that needs evolving or adaptation, then highlight it, put a star beside of it, circle it, do whatever you've got to do with it, and just look through those notes, and hopefully you'll come up with some things that you can pull out of today's session. And I'm just going to read what Frank said here. So our business remains owner managed. With this, it brings its own idiosyncrasies. I'm glad you managed to spell that, Frank. I wouldn't be able to spell that. Well done. This has both pros and cons, and if we were quiet, it would take considerable thought to agree on the change. Yeah. Frank, do you want to, if you're off mute or want to take yourself off mute, do you want to explain a little bit more, and perhaps is there something more that you want to ask around that? I mean, I think you're absolutely right. You know, pros and cons. If it's owner managed, it brings its own issues. And it's not about being acquired. It's about thinking about what they would do and what would change. And then agreement, sometimes we have to compromise, and sometimes we know that the change is essential, but it's a change we don't like. It's a change that's uncomfortable at the moment, but we've got to make that change. Is that something that's an issue as well?
It could well be. I mean, we're not in the process of moving on, selling out, but even part of succession planning, as we're touching base on this morning, you know, because we're owner managed, which has its positives, because you know that quirkiness reflects in our brand, and to lose that, we'd probably lose our identity. So when you're asking questions about, you know, challenges and what would you change or what you'd like to see change, etc. Some of it, I'd say, well, the habit forming, I'd definitely change. But how do you overcome that? Because, you know, as an owner-managed business, apart from the quirks and the characteristics,
Yeah.
the eccentricity, if you like, remains. And if you take that away, then you use identity a wee bit.
Yeah. And I think, and that's a good point. And when I see businesses that are acquired or merged or get management buyouts, whatever it is, the thing that the business owners are always very keen on is retaining that identity. And I think that vision is part of it, is that identity. So the values, the vision of where you've got to go. And I know I mentioned the funeral director. I can't think of his name. Peter. He had a better deal from the co-op than he did from Dignity. And whilst he didn't like some of the changes that Dignity brought in, they still have retained all of the identity of that funeral director business. Co-op, he knows, would have just dissolved it into the co-op identity. And I think if you, and that's, I'm glad you mentioned that, because when you go through this, whether you're looking to sell or have anybody else take over or not, doesn't make any difference. When you do that magic wand, no money, no people or any problem, and you think, what would somebody else change? Part of that decision-making process should be against the plan. Yeah, and you only make the changes that fit with the plan, with the mission of where you're going. And absolutely, you only make the changes that help you achieve the vision, that keep you on track. If there's a change that is likely in any way to distract you from your plan or from your mission and your vision, then that's an absolute no. It's an immutable no from me. Can't be changed.
Good. Okay, good. No, that's interesting to hear, because it's something that, I personally often sort of sit back and reflect on, because there are things that obviously in any business you need to change to stay ahead.
Yeah.
But it's the old adage, isn't it? If it's not broke, don't fix it. But some things, although they're not broke, still require a bit of tweaking.
Yeah, and is the thing that's not broken, is it still helping us get to our plan? Because an external environment might have actually moved it on. And I think a lot of people on this call will probably resonate with that and jump in by all means. But I think it is important to hold those things up against a plan. And that's why I'm trying to get you to think ahead of it. Because what you see, Frank, is people very often don't think about this ahead of time enough. And they get to a point where there suddenly becomes this crisis that they've got to deal with, or this opportunity that they've got to grasp like a nettle. And they make rash decisions, and they make bad decisions potentially because they've not thought about it. They're not prepared for it. So just this process, even if you're thinking, I'm not going to sell my business 10 years, I did this process back in my business in 1997. And I didn't actually exit the business till 2009. So it was that kind of difference. So, it's being prepared. And when I made the decisions, as you said, against the values, against the vision, etc. So yeah, absolutely. But everything should be compared against the plan that we've talked about in previous webinars.
Yep, that's it. Good, thanks.
Thanks for asking that.
Yeah.
Okay. Just a few final slides just to get the brain juices a little bit looser, really. Look at other people. Look at what other people are doing. I mentioned this before. Encourage participation. Get people involved. Get people inside the business involved. If you want to have a continuance with the community, it would be a shame not to get the community involved. So don't be frightened of feedback. Don't be frightened of getting other people involved, and learn from other people as well. The other thing, and I think this goes back to what you were just saying there, Frank, is the place to start is by loving the business yourself. Joe, you mentioned how other people are. What you've got to do is make sure that you're not falling out of love with your business. And if you are, go back to the start and reinvigorate that love, your passion, and that love of having the business and being in business. Because I see too many people, in all my working life, that have a business which is just a really bad job. They have people in their business that get paid more than what they do, get better employment terms than they do, work shorter hours than they do, don't have all the anxiety and all the stress, and they don't love it. I don't mind any of those as long as I'm fired up and I'm passionate and I'm loving the business. So I just want to finish off on that point of, start by loving the business. It's really important that we do that. And you do need everybody on board. And don't just hand it off to somebody else. Be part of it. You have got to be at the center of this continuance. This isn't about, oh, I'll delegate it to somebody else and I'll let continuance look after itself. Be part of it. Be involved in it. And remember, I couldn't get a cross against this. Continuance isn't about an organizational chart. Now, this is where Jackie will probably slap me at this point. The organizational chart is important in the business, but when you're looking at continuance, it's more than just the hierarchy of the business. Okay, it's more about the way that roles and responsibilities flow. It's more about what are you doing and what are other people doing to make things in your business better. Okay, organizational charts are very important, and I get everybody doing organizational chart. But when it comes to legacy and continuance, you've almost got to put a cross through the organizational chart. Think outside of that organizational chart, as we talked about with Hazel and with Joe, and look at, is everybody in the business doing something to make things better? Okay, I know that's a simple statement, but again, that ties in with what Frank was just saying there as well. Now, I asked you to circle things. I asked you to work on things. What I'd like you to do is, as always, from all of my webinars, take away 3 things that you can do some action on. And it might be 3 things that you can do some action with later. If any of you watch my Monday's Moments on social media, I have my Not Now box. Some of them might be a little bit later, but I want you to think about one thing that you can do from today's webinar. And what I'd like you to do is share that in the Q&A box or in the chat box. What one thing can you do following on from today's webinar? Oh, Jackie, thank you. I love agreeing with me. In the past, we've moved away from the traditional. Yeah, I think there's lots of different versions. Very flat organizational charts are great, or even inverted. So great. So whilst you're writing that in the Q&A box, share with me what action you're going to take, because we want to hold you accountable to getting something done by writing it down. If you write it in the Q&A box, you write it in the chat box, then I'm more confident that you're going to do something with it. Joe, put a plan together regarding succession planning. Absolutely. Fantastic. Okay, so put that in there. Whilst I'm doing that, of course, I'd like to thank you. We've got 2 or 3 minutes before we get to the end of this. The contact details are on there for the productivity program if you want to get in touch with them. Has anybody got any questions? Again, if you've got any questions, please either just don't type it in the Q&A box, just jump yourself off of mute and just ask it. Hazel said getting feedback from the team members, suppliers, Jackie reviewing the pricing structure. Yeah. Anybody got any questions? Anybody want to take themselves off mute and ask any questions? And thank you for asking the questions as we've gone through. That's really useful. You always get that tumbleweed moment at the end of every webinar where people are stunned into silence. So it's good to ask questions as you're going through. Any points? Anything else to share in the questions and answers box? Got 1 minute left to put in what you're going to do, what action you're going to take. What are the 3 steps that you can do something with? Maybe not now, maybe later on. What's been something of value from today's webinar? What have you took? What sort of inspiration, blinding flash of the obvious that have you now realized? Because, at the end of the day, what I want to do is help each of you be aware, be better educated, and be accountable. They're always my 3 things with every encounter I have with any person or any business. And hopefully we've done that today. Any questions? Because some of you must have other actions that you're going to take. Look through your notes. Think about what it is that you're going to do next from this. It could just be to sit down and think, what would be my wish list if money and people were no problem? Who's in my community? Simple things. Doesn't have to be a complex thing. Who are the people in the business that think like me or have the same passion as me? Who perhaps could be a good person to be involved in the continuance who aren't? Who do you have to accept, like we chatted earlier, that they're just people that are good at what they do, and they're just always going to be good at that, and they're going to stay where they are. And you just have to accept that and bring other people in that are going to drive the business forward. And then you have to deal with their potential resentment of that when they suddenly realize that they might have missed out. That's always an issue, always is an HR issue as well. Okay, well, it's 11:30, so we've hit the hour. If you've got nothing else that you want to ask, please, if you've got any questions that you'd rather chat with outside of this, please reach out and let me know. And if you've got any questions that you want of the productivity team, reach out to them. There's lots of help, lots of support. And of course, the last webinar of this series is in 2 weeks' time, same time, 10:30. If you're able to jump on early, that would be great, so we can make a quick start. I'm really pleased that some of you got some things that you're going to do here. Have a great week. Keep on top of the changes. Keep up to date. I hope you're applying for your Lincolnshire grants, digital vouchers, and everything else that's out there as well. And you've got your expressions of interest in for all things like that. And if there's ever anything you need, reach out to the productivity program or reach out to me directly. And thank you very much for participating. It's always a pleasure to take people off mute and have that interaction as well. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.